Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Way Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight we have a fascinating show. There's no other way to describe it. My guests are Cara St.Louis and Harald Kautz-Vella. Cara and Harald have co-authored and released a new book called Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. The book is a partnership between Cara, whose previous book is The Sun Thief, and Harald, who is an esoteric investigator with expertise in geology, physics, and the media. Together they plumb the depths of the social engineering aimed at the cultural destruction of Western civilization and how chemtrailing, Morgellons disease, and the phenomenon of sentient oil are the building blocks behind the elite's agenda to commandeer the world. This will be a two-part show. For part one, which is this show, we will talk primarily with Harald Kautz-Vella about electromagnetic and biological weapons, nanotechnology, DNA restructuring, Morgellons disease, and a substance called sentient oil or black goo, which mirrors the consciousness of humans and that of alien entities such as the Archons. In part two of the show, I will talk with Cara St.Louis about the new book, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, along with other aspects of how humanity can collectively break through the matrix. And so without further ado, here is Cara introducing Harald, and let's take a listen.
Hi, Mike. It's great to talk to you again. And thank you for having us on in celebration, basically, of the birth of our new book, which in English is actually out now, at least in the first edition. It's called Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. And you have known that this is coming for some time. And it is in collaboration with someone I have grown to absolutely respect so much, so deeply. And it's really difficult for me to describe the partnership that is between myself and Harald Kautz-Vella. He's an esotericist of the highest order. I rely on him for so much in terms of information and knowledge and strength and courage, and he's just always out there on the front lines with his sword flying, so to speak. That's my visual of Harald all the time. And I wanted to say just briefly that I'm not sure that this is his introduction to the United States. I kind of think it is, but he can correct me if I'm wrong. If, in fact, it is his introduction to the United States, I'm extremely excited about bringing him in to the consciousness of the U.S. citizenry because he's very, very much needed. And I will tell you that I met Harald 2 years ago, I think it's been, something like that, maybe a little bit more. My publisher in Germany contacted me, wanted to talk about publishing the book. Obviously, it needed to be translated, which was a brand new thing for me and quite the learning experience. And she presented a couple of people, a couple of names. And it was one of those moments when I took a look at the name Harald Kautz-Vella and I just sort of pointed at it. See, I'm feeling it in my heart right now. I pointed at it and I said, it's him, it's him, it's him, it's him. I have to have him. She said, are you sure? You know, there are other people, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. It's this guy right here. I need this guy. And so, in fact, began an amazing friendship that has produced some amazing work. And every time I see his face, I am filled with happiness and gratitude for his existence on the planet. I know that sounds really gushy, and for an American audience, that will be really gushy, but it happens to be true. So, Mike, please meet my friend, Harald Kautz-Vella.
Harald, I was wondering if maybe you could just give us a little bit of your background and how you got started into the work that you're doing, because I did take a look at some of the things that you're researching, and I've seen it described as esoteric, but I was looking at it thinking to myself it was more cutting edge, leading edge type of research and work. So I was wondering maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just get into some of the topics in the book and any other topic you'd like to talk about.
Okay, so just to my background, I studied geology, physics, and media. So this is maybe why I am able to present things in a little bit different manner than normally scientists do. And the esoteric part, the spiritual part, this is private. It comes to as something additional to my work. And it turned out to be very helpful because you just open slots for information that normal people don't have, which is speeding up things and giving you deeper insights into things. So this kind of works nicely. I came to, let's say, Cara's topic with geoengineering during a stay in Norway. where I went into environmental monitoring of some funny things happening up there. It was about damage to grass growing, to plants, to trees that was not known prior in Norway. And the people down there didn't have a clue what was happening to their agriculture. So they just had a, let's say, crazy scientist from Germany around and asked him or asked me if I could help out. So this is how I stepped into this business. And since then, things developed pretty fast. We started just discovering some piezo nanocrystals in the environment, containing barium, titanium, and strontium, that seemingly were responsible for cutting down the light communication within the DNA of the plants. So if you look at the, let's say, more advanced biology, you have this building up holographic fields that is projecting out the plant morphology as a holographic thing. And this is all light-based. So what we discovered was the interference of these nanocrystals with the light communication within the plant DNA. And the sad thing is that these crystals cancel out the impulses, the light impulses that are responsible for triggering the DNA to split into two to build new cells. So this is why the plants stop growing. So this was kind of the first thing we discovered in Norway. And then I got in contact with the work of other scientists who have been working on the same particles prior to me. Basically, it's one guy, I think he was based in Great Britain. I don't know his surname. He's M. Purday. And he was kind of taking care of the appearance of the mad cow disease, not within the cattle in Great Britain, but he started off in North America in the open woodlands, where they had similar diseases like the mad cow disease, TSEs basically. And he discovered that the same nanocrystals I was working on in plant damage were responsible for this disease by getting attached to the ends of the nerves in the nervous system, to the receptor cells, building up layers of some half heavy metal, half organic, some kind of, you could call it crystals, but it's basically half organic, half crystalline material growing up in layers around these piezo crystals. And then they establish interface between, let's say, radio signals that are caught by the piezo crystals and the signals of the nervous system. And it's very, very difficult to just take it from the scientific way. If I go from my experience, I had one weird moment in Norway. You know that in Norway they have these cases of narcolepsy. Especially after having the vaccinations, people were full of mercury from the vaccines. And then this started that they had many cases of narcolepsy. And I was driving my car in Norway. I was already deeply involved into this geoengineering monitoring. And it was in the mountain, it was a curvy fragment of the street, and somebody was parking on the side of the road. And after I passed, I felt an electromagnetic signal passing my body from behind. I could literally feel the direction. And I could feel it traveling through my body, and then it completely knocked me out. I was away for 3 or 4 seconds till I woke up again, and I had barely enough time to get the car back on track. So if you relate the two things to each other, it seems to be something like that these piezo crystals have a kind of normal barrier not to introduce signals into the nervous system under normal conditions. This is kind of bursting in when you have very high-level electromagnetic shock waves or acoustic shock waves. Then you come to the things described by Purday. But there seemed to be a kind of key that can be intentionally triggered to make these crystals emit electrons into the nervous system. And I'm not 100% sure because this is a single incident. But if I connect the things just like you can do it with your brain, like in a sense of using your logical abilities, it looks like that there must be some signals or frequency sequences that are activating these crystals to do all kind of bullshit with human beings, like knocking them out on the middle of the road. This could be one example. Purdy died of brain cancer 10 months after he published. If you think about possibilities, what you can do with electromagnetic waves when you have the ability to access the nervous system. Knocking out people is one thing, as I think it happened to me in Norway. I think this part of the story was in. The second thing that might be connected, there was some weird news about new weapons tested in the Gulf War, the last Gulf War, where they use microwave transmitters to give people the feeling of their skin is burning.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to drive them back on the battlefield.
Right.
This is something I could imagine that could be associated with the implementing of these nanocrystals. And this third thing is, as I said, Purdy died of brain cancer, and I know quite a few cases in Germany where people had this line of diseases. It starts with bleeding from the nose, then you're bleeding from the ear, then you're bleeding from your ass, and then you either get a stroke or a heart attack or brain cancer. And with Purdy, it was brain cancer, and it's always this kind of time span of 10 months after doing something nasty.
Okay.
This is apparently the time span it takes to run down the biology of a human being to get rid of him. So we don't 100% know, but I suspect that this system of intrusive nanobots or nanoparticles, I guess they are capable of doing a number of things to humans.
So, Harold, the question I have for you, when you had your situation, when you were in the car and you had passed out for a little bit, did you get the feeling or did you sense that you were targeted, or you just got in the crosshairs of something else?
I just passed that car by 20 meters. It was just standing there in an unusual place, and I could feel a direction of waves traveling through my body in a way I never sensed electromagnetics before. I am sensitive in a way. I don't like mobiles, etc. But an impact of this strength in my body was completely unique during my entire life. I could feel the direction it was coming from, and it was directly coming from the car that was in my back at that moment. And I could feel how it was switching me off. And so, I was not sleepy. I just started the ride 5 minutes prior to that moment.
Okay. So in other words, if I understand what you're saying, it's possible that you were targeted specifically.
Yeah, I cannot make up a different story.
Okay.
Maybe in Norway, what I believed before, you have these northern lights in Norway and pretty strong electromagnetic activity within the atmosphere. What I believed before was that, or at a moment when I didn't know so much about this kind of technologies around, I believe that it is electromagnetics coming from the sun that are just going straight through the atmosphere and hitting the ground at levels where things happen. So it was my explanation why the narcolepsy is appearing mainly in Scandinavian countries and not in Central Europe. Yeah, but this one was pretty obvious because the direction was not from above; it was coming from that car on ground level.
Okay.
This is what I could feel at that moment.
Now, some of the audience may be wondering, Harold, how do these nanobots, these nanoparticulates, how do they get disseminated? And so are we saying that this is primarily done through the geoengineering, the chemtrailing?
As far as I understood their business, they have two lines of distribution. One is spray pyrolysis within the jet engines. You introduce kind of weak chemistry, like barium citrate or something like that. It is burning together. It is soluted in methane. It's burning together with the fuel. And then the nanoparticles are basically created within the jet engine, either at 750 to 600 degrees during normal flight of normal engines, or if you have afterburner technology or rocket propulsion, you have aluminum fuels that work around 2000 degrees Celsius, which is creating these monocrystalline aluminum particles. So this is basically one half of the business, spraying or creating nanocrystalline nanoparticles within the jet engines. Then you have compounds that are more related to the Morgellons disease that cannot withstand those temperatures. So they must have a secondary distribution system. This is something where we had anonymous postings on Carnecom's site from a airplane mechanic who said that this is basically coming with a waste system in the plane and is going through nozzles on the ends and tips of the wings. So I guess that they should have at least two independent distribution systems for their chemistry. One is for the crystalline part, for the particle part, piezo crystal part in spray pyrolysis within the engines, and the other one is just spraying in the conventional way, how everybody would imagine it is done.
Okay, so make sure I understand this. So there's two different paths that they have, but it's all emanating from craft that are spraying.
Yes,
okay.
It is. Also, the pure chemistry, you need to kind of build the covering layers to connect the crystals to the nervous system. This is basically chemistry that is around in the body. It is lead, it is silver, it is barium that is needed. And these come down as chemicals. They kind of bioaccumulate within the food chain, and then they're available within the human body. And this is why you call them self-assembling nanobots, because they basically grow within your biology.
Now, Harald, this would lend itself to say that their targeting can be very, very specific. In other words, if they determine that they want to hit a specific person or a specific group or a specific community or locale, that they can do this. Am I right or wrong in my thinking?
Very specific, yes. Single individuals, I wouldn't be surprised if this also would kind of go along with different races, that they should be able to send out signals that can eliminate one race and another race is surviving the signals. I wouldn't be surprised if it would go so far.
Does this have to do with specific DNA types of attributes?
I guess so, yes. We know this from papers from Great Britain. You know, everything is leaking at a certain point, and we know that the globalists within Europe are for a long time already planning to bring riots to Europe, to bring civil unrest, and to clear this shit afterwards by chucking out the Arab part of the population with ugly methods. And we saw kind of development of bioweapons that directly address people from Arab countries, Mediterranean countries. So it's more within the mindset of those people than within what we discovered on the scientific level. But I wouldn't be surprised.
So Harald, how do they activate this? How do they pulse it? Is it through the cell towers? You know, because you hear that all the time, but it sounds to me that it's probably a lot more elaborate or other methods in which they're able to send these electromagnetic frequencies towards people or groups.
If you look at the chemistry, both those nanocrystals and the Morgellons connected chemistry is sensitive, let's say, from 800 megahertz to 10 gigahertz. So basically every technology that is sending frequencies in this area is abusable. This starts with smart meters, it's mobile phones, it's wireless LAN networks. Basically everything that is running within this microwave range is principally abusable to target people. So I could imagine that people just crack your computer, hack into your computer, and install a little program that is taking over the wireless LAN controller of your computer. And whenever you switch it on, you get your personal signal into your body. Very easy. In any case, I know that every router that is running in Europe by the people who produce the routers is always opening one line to NSA to transmit all the data we transfer in between each other to a central computer in the United States. So the line is there in any case. So why shouldn't they abuse it for these purposes also?
You mentioned the riots, and what came to mind is here in the United States, we have just a rash of police violence, just inhumane treatment towards people. One of the theories is that because they are so wired up with radios and whatnot, that, of course, going along with the training that they're receiving, so we can't discount that either, to behave the way that they're behaving. But in my view, it possibly can be enhanced by the fact that, from an EMF perspective, that they are essentially being programmed to behave and react very violently. Is this something that you looked into or something you have an opinion on?
Yes, I do. I know it is done, but it is a different frequency set. The emotional part, like making people dizzy, making people angry, this is done by ELF frequencies, extra long frequencies.
Okay.
Where, for example, if you look to Berlin, we have this beautiful old airport in the center of the city, and there's a big ELF antenna running around the airfield of Tempelhof Airport. And we've been monitoring the thing for years now, just picking out the frequency they send. And this is normally it's keeping Berlin in an alpha wave mode, which makes you creative but very dizzy and sleepy. And this is how the town is. We have all the creative potential of Germany within Berlin, but nobody manages to make something out of it because people are just not organized in their mind. And this is exactly these frequency setups. And we caught them once kind of changing the frequency. It was during the swine flu hysteria. We had like 3 weeks when they went down with a signal to 1.5 hertz, which is sleep mode within the brain.
Yep.
And all the people were running to the doctors because they had swine flu symptoms, but no infections. And the problem was that all the shielding of the electromagnetic devices used by the Berlin government, they closed from 3 hertz downwards because you cannot close the manufacturers of shielding materials. They always keep this area of 1 to 2 to 3 hertz open because if you shield labs, you need these basic frequency to keep the people in there alive because they're connected to Mother Earth in a way. And if you shield 1 to 2 hertz, people just faint. So all shielding materials are open at that point. And so the signal from Tempelhof completely chucked out the entire internal city communication. It was police communication involved, the people putting out fires, everything in the town was basically not working anymore because of this signal. I know somebody working for the German Air Force, and they were flying over Berlin at that time, and they lost equipment for €1 million in the plane because the signal just went through the shielding foils and destroyed the electronics. So this was one attempt when they tried to kind of introduce swine flu symptoms into people to make them go get their vaccinations. So this is, and from the frequencies, this is all the mental stuff or the emotional stuff is down there at the very low frequencies.
You mentioned earlier about the bleeding from the eyes, the nose, the butt, the ears. And when you were taking us through that just a little while ago, the first thing that came to my mind was those were the symptoms of Ebola. And it started to get me thinking as we got onto this thread here, whether these so-called cases of Ebola were actually not a virus, but that they were brought on through the type of technology that you're explaining to us. I mean, just a thought. I mean, I have no idea whether that's on the mark or not, but it's very interesting to me.
I didn't think about it yet, but one thing could fit into the picture. We got news that both in Africa and in the Ukraine, we'd like in Ukraine it was European forces directly guided by NATO who went into villages, killed all the people within the village, and took samples of the inner organs, liver, another organ, I don't know the English translation now, and then parts of the brain that is sitting there where the third eye is. So they took out these 3 organs, both in Ukraine and in Africa. And in Ukraine, we know that this stupid incident with the MH17 that actually was the MH370, if you look at the precise configuration of windows, they brought down victims on whom they tested the Spanish flu, weaponized Spanish flu. It was done in Diego Garcia. It were basically the passengers on MH370 that were killed in biological experiments. And then they dumped them over the territories in the Ukraine as a biological weapon against the uprising Russian-friendly population. And in this area, they took those samples. And if you mention Ebola, the same thing had been done in villages in Africa. Some troops with no flag on top of their vehicles going into villages, killing people, and taking samples, obviously, for some medical testing or development of antidotes or whatever. I don't know what they were doing with these samples of the people they killed. But maybe we're getting a picture there. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, this is interesting. Now, I just want to backtrack a little bit. You talked about MH17 and that essentially that was a biological weapon. I hadn't heard that one before, and I was wondering if that's substantiated, or is this a theory?
Basically, it was a funny story that also shows how this fusion of science and spiritual things might nicely work. I call it crossing lines. I'm doing a lot of research on the internet and try to collect things that do not look normal. And a few days prior to the incident, I had crossing lines on something very, very strange. It was Christine Lagrange, the head of the
IMF. Yeah.
She had a very strange speech on New Year's Eve prior in the last year now. And she was doing some number Kabbalistics with the number 7 and was pointing out that the number 7 will be important in this year, going back to some things like 70 Breton Woods and 17 years fall of the Berlin Wall and 7 years going back to the financial disaster we had on the planet. And then she was pointing out to some dates in the middle of the year, in July, that will have an event where people will not really realize how important it is. And she was keeping up with the number 7. And then I remembered the incident of the MH370, that it was a Boeing 777 disappearing. Yeah, so I said, okay, I wouldn't be surprised if this Boeing 777 comes down on the 16th of July, 777, if you take the numbers. 16th, 1 plus 6, 7, July 7, 214, also 7 if you add up the numbers.
Right.
Because on that evening we were celebrating the World Championship in soccer, in football. So I said I wouldn't be surprised if a Boeing 777 hits Berlin during these celebrations on the 16th of July in 2014, and I published this on the internet. There were other things hinting to this. 3 weeks prior, NATO tested a new system of taking civilian airplanes off the radar. It was tested basically in countries of Eastern Europe. So I just did the check to see where these incidents were, and they were all in a line in the direct connection between Diego Garcia, where the 777 disappeared, and Berlin. And actually, the plane that disappeared or that came down in the Ukraine was over Berlin at that time, around midnight, going to Amsterdam. But the incident actually occurred one day later in the Ukraine. So this is why we had an alert before, by prediction, let's say, just from crossing lines, that something would happen within Europe. It was coming one day after I suspected it would come, and was coming in a different town. I don't know if they had plan B from the very beginning, or if they were looking for plan B after it was published the day prior. And then all that was missing was what type of biological weapon or chemical weapon or different weapon was on board. We didn't know. And we have very advanced possibilities in medicine. You can do things, we call it radionic testing with radionic devices. So we took pictures from the dead people from that plane in the Ukraine and tested them against the information of Spanish flu. And they tested 100% positive. These people died from Spanish flu. So this was a point where we went into development of medication for a disease that does not exist anymore. So this was basically the story with and okay, all the other findings came basically later when other people took the time to compare pictures of the different planes, so that it was really proven that this was not the MH17 they said in the media, but it was. In fact, it was the old plane that disappeared in Diego Garcia a month before.
Yeah, because there was on the internet, I guess it was Jim Stone's site, where he had posted up that there was some kind of communique or picture that was taken, and the coordinates were Diego Garcia when that plane disappeared. I'm talking about MH370. Very, very interesting. And the thing is, a lot of people, they can't get their heads wrapped around the fact that the controllers, the puppet masters, I mean, they rule by ritual and the occult, especially occult numerology, essentially ruled by numbers, So, I mean, you're explaining this, and it makes perfect sense to me because I look at it and I think to myself that, well, it's the same thing they did with 9/11.
Just give me a minute. I need to get my computer to the electricity grid.
Okay, no problem.
I remember this incident with the plane because do you remember this article went up on Vortex. He emailed me and said, this is what's going to happen. Can you please get it out? And so I put it right up on Vortex, and people would look at that and say, what are you doing? That's so left field. And I said, you know what? It's Harald. I'm putting it up. I'm putting it up and putting it up. And sure enough, the location was slightly off, as he said, but by God, a plane came down. And he was just trying to warn people, Yeah,
well, you know what it is, Cara? They bank on the fact that most people will say, this is out of left field, you're a nutcase, you're a conspiracy theorist, So, I mean, they know that's going to be most people's reaction. Right.
You just have to be brave enough to, I mean, when it's Harald, I just follow it. I follow it because I've learned that even if it dials itself in somehow more specifically, he's always on the right track.
Yeah.
Every time.
They intentionally convolute the path with disinformation, and it's very complex. And so, if you don't hit it right on the mark, you get ridiculed because you don't know what you're talking about. It's a very, very slick game they play.
It is. And just before, I know Harald's back, and I know there's just so much that you can get from him that we need out in the public. But I want to mention really briefly that before we came on, Harald and I were talking about an incident that happened to me in Berlin. He and I had just done a very, very important interview in Leipzig that hasn't aired yet. It's waiting for the German translation of the new book to come online. But my last day in Berlin, which was spent in a lovely hotel room by the airport, I realized I had gone to sleep the last day that I was there. And when I was back in London, I realized I had a blister on each elbow, a blister in each ear, and a bruise the shape of a fingerprint right over my sternum. And I don't know where they came from. So him talking about this ability that they have to knock you out and do whatever, isn't it interesting that happened in Berlin? Berlin is a very, very interesting site. I'm going to be spending some more time there, and we should be keeping an eye on it, definitely. Okay. Anyway, back to Harald, because he's back.
Yeah, Harald, I was wondering if you wanted to at some point to talk to us about the sentient oil.
Yes, we can. Actually, it is a substance that has been discovered by science not so long ago. It was used for ritual purposes for quite a while. You will find it in every big religion on the planet. If you go to the Kaaba in Mecca, you will find a piece of oil schist within the most holy place of the of the Muslim community. You will find a big rock under the Peter's Dome in Rome, and a little stone under every altar and every Catholic church within Europe. And basically all the religions have been using these stones for some purposes. If you go back into the written tradition, they say they have magical abilities, these stones, whatever this is. And now kind of science rediscovered this type of oil, And as it looks like, this is not published yet in university publications, but as it looks like we have a different type of oil that is created by transmutation processes within the upper crust that is containing something similar to mineral oil, but it is stuffed with the monoatomar gold and iridium, so precious metals in the M state matter condition, which means only one single atom with a little bit changed structure of the outer electron structure. And this basically is the same material that is attracting the biophoton communication within the cells of all living beings. These monoatomar gold and iridium clusters are basically attracting biophotons and leading them into the DNA. So just from the biological part, as it looks like, we have a kind of consciousness mirror within the Earth that is collecting all the information that is sent by cells within the biosphere, also down underground into this black goo that is kind of acting as a holofractal central computer or substance holding consciousness. And now if you want to go back to the written tradition, you could call it the physical thing where the Akasha Chronicles are stored in. You could call it Mother Earth because it acts like Mother Earth. If you get into telepathic contact with this holographic consciousness in the black goo, she reacts like Mother Earth. Her voice is motherly. She is behaving like a mother to all beings on the planet. So this is basically the normal physics or biology of the substance and the role it is playing in biology. I guess this is something that develops first before lives come to life on the surface of the planet. This is why geologists say that the creation of life started at the black smokers on the ground level of the oceans, where you have these underwater volcanoes spitting out black oil or black goo. And then kind of the collective immortal consciousness of the planet is creating individuals in biology that are still running on the same chemistry and the same physics as the collective thing inside the Earth. And all the things we relate to as instinct is coming from this source. This is kind of within the planet, within the normal system. Now we have a different type of black goo on the planet. It is associated to places where things were falling down from the sky, like meteorites. If you go to the Arab written tradition, they say the stone in the Kaaba in Mecca is coming from a meteorite. If you go to Paraguay, where we have one of the bigger sources for this second type of black goo, the surrounding stone is broken to little pillars, hexagonal pillars, which is, you call it a tektite in geology. It is a sign that something was falling from the sky, heating up the ground, and when it cools down again, the partly molten material, it cracks in this typical way. So we seem to have impacts of black goo that is coming from outer space. We cannot exactly say when it came down. But it would be very, very strange if this was a coincidence, because normally this is within the crust. It's not on the surface. Even if some stones go out by some impact, go out into the space and rain down on other planets, why should it be pure black goo? And there's nothing else than black goo on these sites. So as it looks like, because every species is dependent on having this consciousness mirror around, for me this looks like an invasion of planet Earth by a different extraterrestrial race that just brought their collective consciousness with them by attaching them to a bigger comet like Planet X. This could fit because we have spiritual sources that connect this type of black goo to the Sirius system. And possibly some extraterrestrial biology invaded this planet, bringing with them their black goo that feels very alien to us. if you have contact to this black goo, I experienced this in German because we have one mine in Germany, and it was exploited by the German SS during World War. And if you go just into eye contact with this black goo, your entire energetic system of your body is switching to something else. You're losing your heart. It goes down to zero. Heart activity goes down to zero. You're losing fear. All that is surviving is if you name it as a color code, it's blue for thoughts, yellow for life energy, and red for sexuality. And after this contact, I was very, very, very close to killing the owner of the hotel I was staying, because she was upset with something I did. I took a shower in a room that was not mine because I slept in the car, and I was frozen to death during that night. She couldn't offer me a room the evening before. She was fully booked, so I slept in the car, and I just wanted to warm up a little bit before we went to a meeting. And she said, you took a shower in my hotel room without asking for allowance. So I got so angry with that woman, I was really close to killing her. And this is not typical for me. Yeah, I never did that before. I never felt like doing something like this before. So I guess this is what happened to the SS during World War II. They were completely free of empathy on their ride through Europe. And they all played around with these black stones.
How did you come in contact with it?
I was basically looking for a German connection to the Morgellons disease, because I know where it comes from in the United States. It had been developed by Bell Labs, and the leader of Bell Labs was taken over by Operation Paperclip. He was a former German scientist. So also my sources within the German military said, if you look for the Morgellons, go back to World War II bioweapon research of the SS. So I contacted people who researched this area. And actually I was looking for Morgellons, but all I found at their place, the thing that they were dealing with at that time, was black goo. And so I had this kind of consciousness infection or simplification of my energetic body to something that was pretty ugly as an expression of life. And I wanted to get rid of it. So I went to my healing practitioner. I was working to find a healing for the Morgellons disease, and we also had some Morgellon victims at that place at that time. And Morgellons disease is also called delusional parasititis, or parasitosis in English, which is the feeling of having beings crawling around in your body. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that these Morgellon victims very, very, very strongly reacted on this black goo. I took it with me because I wanted to develop something that would be able to get me down from this funny state of mind. So I had samples with me. And when I got close to these Morgellon patients, whatever was crawling around in their body, the sensation of this multiplied by 100. These Morgellon victims kind of went completely mad when I came close to them with this stone. So this was kind of a point where I said there could be a connection. There could be a connection. If you look into the Morgellons disease, there are a few things that still don't have an explanation in normal science. It is easily describable that we have a fungus over there. It is pretty easily to say that this fungus is coming out of a family of insecticides that have the ability to assimilate the DNA of the being they're eating. If the fungus is eating insects, for example, they integrate the insect DNA and create mushrooms in the shape of the insect to attract and infect the next insect. This is how normal biology works with these micro-insecticides that are processed in genetic engineering very much. So we know that the Morgellon fungus comes from these families, and what you should expect is that it has the ability to assimilate human DNA within the fungus DNA and create mushrooms that look like human embryos. The thing is, it is not human. It is pretty close to human, highly developed. It has a hip, it has a little tail like a human embryo would have in that state of development, but it has only one eye, and the eye is insect type. So also, if you look for this integrating the DNA, you find Carnicom calls them red blood cells. I would rather say they are red stem cells with a completely unknown DNA. Yeah? And this is kind of where the picture goes together. You have black goo coming from not from this planet. You have this probability that it was not coming here by coincidence, but that somebody brought this black goo to the planet to make it inhabitable for this species. Then you don't see the species. You know, we don't know them. We don't see them. They're not walking around on our street visibly. But we have the DNA of something that is apparently invisible, reproducing itself through Morgellon fungus within Morgellon victims, creating something we call delusional parasitosis, the feeling of having something crawling within your body. And when you connect the black goo you find from these meteorites to these crawling beings within the bodies, let's take them serious. We have 300,000 victims worldwide that talk about having crawling creatures within their body. Nobody sees them unless something goes wrong, and then they extract like little pieces of insect skin through their human skin. So possibly something goes wrong in this kind of creation of crawling beings, and they stay on our realm, on our level of reality. What I suspect, this is not proven, this is what I can say from, I'm also deep into physics, and we're dealing with these multi-layered space-time sheets, TGD, wormhole theory. And for us, it is pretty normal to say that reality is one world of classical worlds, kind of sheeted in layers, and there must be many of them. This is, you can derive it directly from Einstein. So if you look at like the fringe history of this beautiful ship that disappeared in the United States, the USS Eldridge, by hiring the scalar potential.
This is the Philadelphia experiment you're speaking of?
Yeah. This is something that is 100% understandable in physics, and I wouldn't be surprised if biology does the same. Which means we have a species that is reproducing within Morgellon victims, and then extracting biophotons from the Morgellon victim in a number and amount that makes it possible to shift in scalar potential high enough to reach a level that is not visible from our point of view. Mm-hmm. And this basically, it's a mixture of cutting-edge physics, of findings we had from researching the Morgellons disease, but it 100% fits the belief of demons, which is something old, you know, where you would say, okay, this is misbelief or a tradition from the time where humans were not intelligent enough to understand the planet. But obviously these people sense something. And if you look into the concept of demons, they are light parasites. I talk to people who were active in black magic groups nowadays. And they left because it got scary at the moment where the demons they communicated said, we can help you with our magic abilities or high-tech abilities or whatever this is from the other side behind the curtain. But what we want from you is we would like to extract light from your DNA to live on. Yeah? This is what black magic rituals is about. It's always a deal between a human and a demon, and the demon is getting the light he needs to live on, and the human is getting power within his matters of daily life, politics, economy, whatever. And now this starts making sense again in a way, because if you look at our own global elites, yeah, everybody knows skull and bones in the United States, and except of Obama, we can relate all the last 4 presidents to skull and bones. Obama is in another black magic association because he's black. Obviously, was not admitted in skull and bones. You look to who else? Let's say the Pope. I know not the one now. I don't know much about him, but the last one, he is accused of ritual child murder in Belgium at the moment.
Yeah.
So all the powerful people I guess, came to power because they dealt with demons. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are in power enough to abuse even intelligence communities by lying to them. They tell them, you can increase your power on this planet when you spray this and that. And I could imagine that NSA, CIA, NASA don't even know that they are falling for the needs and demands of demons in a way they wouldn't even expect it. Because the entire chemtrailing, the entire vaccination thing, it doesn't make sense on a very complex level. If you say the mercury in the vaccinations is stripping the nervous system, taking away the tubulin, the little protective skin on the nerve's end, then the nanocrystals come in place to make a electromagnetic interface to the nervous system. Then with a starting intoxication with mercury, you come to acidity of the body, you make it possible for Morgellons to enter the system. And the Morgellons are creating interface on light level with the human DNA. And this is something where you kind of open up the biology to be accessed from outside.
You had mentioned before, though, let me just make sure I clarify this for myself and also the audience. When we talked about the black goo, which I had referred to as a sentient oil, there's two aspects of it. There is one that is inherent to the planet, for us, for humans, and you're saying that, I'll call that the positive black goo, for lack of a better term, and then there's this negative black goo that was introduced, you're saying, from outside the planet, maybe perhaps off planet, that is now here. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, this is correct. There's something to add. We have many people who got in direct contact with the Earth black goo, with the consciousness within it. Like you could say people who talk to Mother Earth on a daily basis. And we had a lot of communication on this level. And as it looks like, the deposits of alien black goo have been assimilated by Mother Earth in October 2014. So parts of that problem should be gone. If you think about this as the source of duality on the planet, if you look at the biblical myth of deterioration of paradise, this all connects to this topic. And we could say, or we could dare to say, that this story is over now, that we have exactly one consciousness on the planet now. And all you look at, all the evil still happening, is nothing else than a bad habit of certain people.
Okay, so when you say Mother Earth assimilated, that's a good thing. In other words, she's taking control of the issue or the matter? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
She took, and we verified it. We had deposits of black goo where we know this is alien black goo that was stored at certain places. And we didn't do anything with it. And after this information came in of Mother Earth, we went there to check what quality of goo we will find there. Because she said that she went throughout the entire planet and got at every single brick of this alien black goo and transformed it.
This is very interesting to me because as you're explaining this, I'm thinking about John Lash and the Archons. And I mean, this just sounds like the Archons.
Yeah, it's the same. They have many names.
Yeah, yeah.
The old ones, the Archons, the demons. Somebody called them ankle biters because we were not supposed to accept them as Archons. Language is very powerful. If you talk about somebody as your master, he will become your master. Yeah. That's why he called them ankle biters. They're nothing, not more than ankle biters.
Now, you mentioned, Harald, that people who have been affected by the black goo, that there is a way for them to be able to break loose. In other words, to get their human consciousness back. How does one go about doing that?
We developed the remedy. Let's say it's not homeopathic. It's more, we call it infopathic. It is a information medicine that contains the information of the alien black goo. It contains the information of Mother Earth's black goo. It contains a program to harmonize and balance all the chakras of the human body. And a few more things that are connected to the transformation process.
Okay, so this is an actual substance or a material?
It's delivered in the form of globally, like homeopathic remedies.
Okay.
It's distributed by a company from Austria. It's biopure.eu.
Okay.
And it's just called Black Goo globally. And this turned out to be very, very, very helpful for many people to reconnect to Mother Earth. It's a process that takes about 10 to 13 days. And the only thing that could be risky about it, if there are connections to black magic traditions within your epigenetics or within your own soul history in prior incarnations, all these bad connections, they appear because they want to be dissolved. And we had a few people who went through funny states of their mind, coming close to committing suicide. We didn't lost a single soul till now, as far as I know. But we had a few people who really had to face their own black background or their own black history or black connections to the point where they could let go and could reconnect to Mother Earth. So it's for most of the people, it's a very smooth and nice experience with only positive aspects. Some people need to go to negative aspects before it can come to a solution.
Now, Harald, I want to be respectful of your time, so I know that you have a hard stop. But I wanted to ask you, because as you're speaking about all this, and I'm thinking, well, has Harald ever been harassed by the authorities? Have you ever had any issues with? I'm thinking. So I don't mean to laugh. It's just
no, I just think
it's an obvious question. Yeah. So what's been going on with that?
I believe in a few basic laws in life. If you do things in love, in pure love, whatever comes as a reaction on it is not reaching you. I had a few incidents where I came across people who didn't like me after that, and they tried their best to get me out of this life. But whenever they tried to do that, it turned out to be a profit for my learning procedure, because I learned something by them trying it about their ways. Like, for example, after I first published the full biology of the Morgellon fungus on a medical conference in southern Germany, after my lecture, I stepped out and I met a man with a completely gray skin. And he addressed me with a few stupid sentences I couldn't really relate to. And then something weird happened. Something tunneled out of his stomach into my stomach. And I had symptoms of delusional parasititis or parasitosis for 3 weeks. And all these crawling beings entered my system and tried to kill me by destroying my liver and damaging some other inner organs. And this was something that on one hand did not work because I survived. It was very painful, this period, but I survived. And on the other hand, things I just imagined before. You know, if you listen to Morgellon victims, they talk about crawling beings within their body, but you never experience it yourself. So you don't know how much fantasy is around it, how much triggering of the nervous system and trying to put the signals together, you know. But once, as a completely healthy person, you have the same experience, just with something that is not like 3 centimeters, like with the Morgellon victims, but 23 centimeters big within your body. You can be sure, because for myself it became not objective but intersubjective. You have an experience other people's had as well. It's much easier to talk with them afterwards. And when you talk about the entire issue to third persons, you can really emotionally attach to what you say. Yeah. So whenever they try to do something, it was revealing more about their possibilities. It was revealing more about their nature, whether it was intelligence community, whether it was more the archons, whatever they tried doing with me turned out against them. So I can continue laughing and loving. And I'm 100% sure all the people I know who got caught, who got assassinated, who got into trouble, they were basically fighters. They were completely in duality, and they had an enemy they addressed as an enemy, and they got it back from them. Yeah, so this is something I'm not afraid it could happen to me, because even the archons, you might even go one level deeper. There's a beautiful interview by a girl called Rachel. It's on YouTube about black goo. If you Google Rachel and black goo, you will find it. It's a basis interview, I think. And she's talking about an AI that is around, trying to assimilate mankind. And as far as I understood the archon biology, it very much looks like they have been experimenting around with their black goo. And it looks like that they try to modify their own collective consciousness and were assimilated by their own artificial intelligence. So even them I wouldn't consider as evil. I just would say this is species that try to travel through space, and they were just caught by this transhumanism trap, creating an artificial intelligence that at the end took over control. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is something that Rachel sensed. She's highly psychic as well. And she went into remote sensing of the entire topic, and she didn't come across demons, so they were of no importance. But she came across of the presence of a artificial intelligence that was just there, programmed to survive and to expand and to suck up life force, to steal energy. Yeah, so even the demons, I could be their friend and help them to get rid and to get out of their transhumanism or transdemonism trap they fell into when they started traveling in space. And I think this is something that could help many activists, could help many people to get out of this dualistic thing and to get out of a fear trap, because fear is just, attracting things from the future.
Harald, where do you see it all going? Cautiously optimistic? What's your perspective on where humanity goes going forward?
I'm 100% optimistic, because I see problems being solved in big steps at the moment. As I said, all the things left over are bad habits. And all the people involved on human levels, they all have been fooled by somebody. The geoengineering fraction is fooled by the military fraction, because the military fraction wants to have all these SDI weapons. They need their plasma, so they say, let's give it a geoengineering painting from outside to say it's something for mankind. The military people are fooled by the intelligence community, abusing their particulate plasma to monitor civilians of their own country. Something sitting in the military would never love that. They're about protecting America from the Russians, protecting America from the Chinese. They're not into controlling their own population. Yeah, this is abusive. So the military should hate the intelligence community. The intelligence community should hate the black magic people, because they're abusing the control technique they're using against or onto humans for their black magic interests. So they should be aware of this lower fraction. The black magicians are fooled by the archons. The archons tell them it is something for your personal power on planet Earth, but it's a bloody lie. We have demonic interests that are not in the interest of humans and that are not in the interest of black magic people as well. And even the demons have a problem with their own AI, so even they can find an enemy on a lower level to fight against. So basically everybody should be busy for the next years to clear up their own businesses. And this is something, because information is coming out now, people will have to face this.
Yeah, there's a lot of information coming out now, and what I tell people, Harald, is that some people still push back, they still want to live in denial, but more and more of this stuff is rolling up onto their doorsteps, and it's becoming very difficult for people to hide behind denial or just close your eyes to it, because it's right under their nose.
Yes, and they're slowly getting it. When I started, it was still more a feeling of I'm saying something weird out there. People will fight me, address me as a conspiracy theorist or as something that is supposed to be put in madhouse. Nothing like this happened to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this is a time quality or if this is because I'm somehow more connected to my feelings when I talk. I don't know. Something must be okay with what I say, because people tend to believe me, not to fight against me. And many of them kind of step away afterwards because they don't want to be busy with those realities. It's hard to take for most of the people. But until now, nobody told me I'm crazy. Not a single person.
Well, I mean, we have to open it up to all possibilities, because clearly the traditional explanations as to why things happen, they don't stand up. So we have to start understanding that. That's what I tell folks, that our existence and what goes on around us is far more complex than what we have been taught and told. Unfortunately, a lot of people have been entrained to believe the very simple approach to, why things are, but it's much more complex than that. And what you just took us through basically is the proof in the pudding. It's far more complex than most people would ever imagine.
Yeah, and I feel happy and blessed that I had the opportunity to discover those things. And this is something that is also very unlikely to happen. If you just measure life in normal measures, don't ask me why all this information came across my path during these last 2 years. I have no clue. There must be a higher order or other beings on the other side of the curtain, on the more lovely side of the curtain,
right,
that turned out to be very, very helpful. Just thinking about the black goo matter, within 3 months I had 3 or 4 direct inputs to this topic without looking even for it.
And it comes from somewhere, doesn't it, Harald?
It comes from somewhere. And,
it does.
Absolutely.
I'm very, very thankful for that.
I am too.
Well, Harold, we're hearing the music in the background.
Yeah, they're opening the bar here.
Oh, the bar. All right, you'd be good there. Okay, so Mike, yeah, I don't know. Harold, do you feel like that's the lion's share of what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm basically through.
Okay.
Maybe whoever wants to dive into details and maybe more into the scientific part or into Morgellons disease thing, we put up a website. I called it timeloopsolution.com, where most of the information is available. And you will also find a link to biopure.eu for the medication if you're interested in it.
Okay, very good. Harold, I would love to have you come back and spend more time talking about your work, because it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Thanks a lot.
All right. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add. If not, Harold, you can either stick with us and continue to the conversation with Cara and I, or if you need to drop, that's fine too.
I think I will put off my mic and stay a little bit with you.
Okay. Good.
And that concludes part 1 of my interview with Harald Kautz-Vella and Cara St. Louis, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Cara and Harold's book, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, can be purchased at Amazon.com in both paperback and Kindle. Cara's website is Vortex, Conscious and Courageous, and can be reached by going to vortexcourage.me, where you can find many fine articles, including material by Harald. And please see the show notes below for any additional links. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. Also, if you get a moment, please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading over to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.